Welcome back to Colin's Arran garden. Oh, what a fantastic Monday we're having. Summer's come back again, garden's exploding, and everybody's out, including my friend the frog. And it's lovely, isn't it, when you find frogs and slow worms and toads and goodness knows what else in your garden. And of course, we rely on the toad or the frog for cleaning up some of our worms and slugs, not the worms, the slugs, you know. So we'll put him back in the ground, off you pop. Now, today I'm going to talk about something really quite sad, and hopefully you haven't had this in your garden, but some of my brassicas, brassicas being cabbages, pak choy, Brussels sprouts, radishes, Swedes, turnips, they're all brassicas, otherwise known as cruciform plants. They're very susceptible to a slime mould. It used to be thought of as being a fungus, but it's a slime mould called Clubroot. So unfortunately in last year and this year some of my brassicas have been wilting, and when the wind comes along it blows them out of the ground, and when you pick them out of the ground this is what you've got. You've got that, and that is full of clubroot, and that's very infectious, and once you've got that you've got to take your plants out, and you can eat the rest of the plant up from there, although the plant will be quite small. But the rest of it you have to burn. Whatever you do, do not compost it. You have to burn it and get rid of it, right? Okay, so that's a sort of normal root, but that's the diseased root. So how do you get it? Well, one of the main ways you get it is by taking soil from a friend. So you have to be very careful taking soil from anywhere, because you really don't want to get clubroot, because once you've got it, little eggs and some other things that swim about to infect the roots are there for 20 years. So number one, do not take soil from a friend. In fact, we'll do a wee list, and towards the end of this short clip there'll be a list to remind you of all the things you've got to do not get clubroot, as well as a few things you can do to actually then grow brassicas in the soil that has clubroot. Okay, we'll come to that. Number one, don't take soil willy-nilly from other people, because it will bring in clubroot, could bring in clubroot. Number two, rotate your crops. I'm currently in sort of the upper circles of garden intelligentsia. They're beginning to say, oh, we don't really need crop rotation, but I think we do. And I think clubroot's a good example of that. So rotate your crops. Number three, in Arran we have very acidic soil. You've got to add lime, because the acidic soil is great for fruit crops, but for everything else you need your pH to be quite high. And I've been on one or two sites where they want to get the pH up towards 8, and that involves putting quite a bit of lime into the soil here, right? And number four, try and keep the soil a bit dry, because apparently if the soil is more moist, then there's more of a chance of these little things, whatever they are, swing into the roots of your brassicas. So that's the sort of things you have to do to avoid getting clubroot in the first place. Once you've got clubroot, obviously what you do then is to try and avoid planting the brassicas. But remember, your brassicas are Brussels sprouts, cabbages, pak choy, kohlrabi, radishes, turnips, Swedes. So it's quite a cross section of vegetables. You can avoid planting them and maybe leave it for a year or two, increase the pH by putting in lime. But then you can also buy special seeds, like DH Brown and King seeds have Brassica resistant seeds, right? Clubroot resistant seeds rather. Brassica resistant seeds. And you can also buy clubroot resistant plants. And when you get these seeds, you grow them in sterile compost, and try and transplant them in as much sterile compost from pots into the ground that you can. And before you put them in the ground, you put some lime in the ground, and then put even some more sterile compost in, and then the plant in the sterile compost in that. So you're actually cushioning your plant against clubroot, and giving it a chance to get to some decent size before some of the roots, or maybe all of the roots, will be infected, right? So that's clubroot for you. Now over here, you see a plant that's wilting. The others look okay, but give it a week or two, this will fall out of the ground, it'll have clubroot on it, and the rest of them might die. So that's clubroot. Hope you don't get it. But if you do get it, well, I hope that can help you. Now we're going to go into something else really quite interesting. Right, here we are with some early potatoes. But hang on, we're near the end of August. What am I doing with early potatoes? Well, this is apparently a new thing. But hang on, there's no such thing as a new thing in any discipline, particularly not in gardening. And as one of the drivers for Arran haulage, I forget his name now, when I hear a look round here, he said, I tell you what, he's forgotten more about gardening than I'll ever know, I'll be honest with you. And he said, nah, potatoes don't know what time of year it is. Right, well anyway, get back to DH Brown are now selling early potatoes in early August. So I bought some, planted them, 6 weeks ago, and they're exploding out the ground. I've got 3 beds of these, and I know I'm going to get lots of nice early potatoes. So there you are, I recommend that. Right, so now I'm going to show you a plant that I've never grown before, but a gardener in southern Scotland recommended this. And here we have Agretti. It's spelled Agretti, and apparently all the top posh chefs love it. It's a bit like samphire, I think. The difference between it and samphire is you get a really good germination of this. I started off growing this in the polytunnel and I've transferred it outside, and it actually grows better outside later in the year than in the polytunnel. And actually, some people like it raw. It's crunchy. Yeah, it's got a bit of a flavour, but what we found is really nice. The best way you can eat this is to fry it in butter with garlic, and it's very nice. And surprisingly, it retains its crunchiness. So it's quite a nice textural thing, yeah? And then the rest of the bed, I've got a good mint here, and parsley, and my favourite herb, wonderful smell, forgotten its name, what is it?
Marjoram.
Marjoram, is it? Yeah. Lovely stuff, lovely stuff. Anyway, so there you go. Right, and now we come to arguably my favourite plant and the easiest plant to grow, and it's known as rhubarb. And you know, this was a staple of the grannies a number of years ago, but guess what? Now it's very sexy. All the young mummies all go for this, you know, all the millennials or the snowflakes or whatever you call them. So this stuff can be quite expensive in the shops. And you know what, we're still sort of wedded rather to this idea that, oh, I'll get a bit of rhubarb from him up the road once a year. Well, you know, you can buy roots of rhubarb, and it doesn't cost that much. So this year I had a lot of spare wood and a lot of really good compost, and I planted 48 crowns of rhubarb. And look at this, it's marvellous, isn't it? Wonderful. You know what, I'm eternally grateful to I got a site on the YouTube called Simply Gardening. Now I strongly recommend Simply Gardening by a guy called Tony, and he doesn't mess about. There's no tinkly music. Well, Charles Dowding's very good, but there's a lot of flowers in his videos and tinkly music and stuff like that, and all classical music. Whereas Tony, he gets straight into it, right? And Tony gave me some fantastic, well, stuff I sort of knew anyway about rhubarb, but basically rhubarb will grow anywhere. But like many things in life, the more energy, the more stuff you put into it, the more you get out of it. And for stuff, rhubarb needs 2 things. No, yes, 3 things. Deep soil, plenty of light, plenty of water, and the more nutrient you can get it, the more horse manure and other types of manure in the soil, then the more you get, the more wonderful rhubarb you get. So, but the other important thing is, and I've learned this to my cost a couple of years ago, the actual top of the rhubarb, the crown of the rhubarb, you have to keep that below the soil. If you pile up the horse manure or whatever and all the soil on top of the root, up top of the crown rather, you get a thing called crown rot. It gets wet and it rots. So you have to keep the roots of the rhubarb above the soil, but find a way to get the nutrient below the crown root on the soil. And what I think probably a good way to do it is to get your horse manure or whatever and mix it in water and then pour it on the ground below the crown root, before the top of the rhubarb. And so there you go. And Tony gave a great thing. He said, look, these are like solar panels, aren't they? Solar panels. So rhubarb's great. And what I'm going to do with this, here we are in August 21. On the 3rd of March 2023, I'm not going to touch much of this. I'm going to cover this in black, a big box of black, and I'm going to force the rhubarb. And if you've never had forced rhubarb, well, you haven't lived, because forced rhubarb is absolutely fantastic. And if you could get it in the shops, it would be very expensive. So forced rhubarb, that's the thing to go for, and that's what I'm going to get. So goodbye from Colin's Arran Garden.